All right, everybody, it's Chris with Drop Dice. So we were going to start a game tonight. However, some emergency came up, so this is just going to be a quick, brief video about the game that we're going to be, that I'm going to be putting out called Shaoyun, using a system called Index Card RPG. It'll be the game that we actually play in the campaign. I just wanted to take a moment and introduce it officially to my channel, because it's been floating around. I've talked about it a little bit, and mostly I've been talking on Facebook, but I hadn't really shown too much on the channel. If you've been following the channel, inside my comment section, I've made a mention to it for pretty much every game since December 27th that I put it in the comment section of all my videos. But there is a link available for anybody who's interested in getting the beta testing document. If you want to provide any sort of feedback or live plays, I'd love to see those videos. Send me a link. If it's just a play report, a great place for that would be the Runehammer forums, or even on Facebook if that's a little bit easier for you. And then I will be doing this campaign, and I'll probably be doing some one-shots as they become available to me. So real quick here, let's kind of jump right into this. Now, the other thing that I wanted to take a moment to shout out for right now is there is a new Index Card RPG bundle pack that you can get. As you can tell, I'm a previous purchaser, so there is a discount available for me because I have some of this bundle already. But if you were to do this, you'll actually get pretty much everything that you would need to run Shaoyun, plus everything else that you would need to run any sort of game in Index Card RPG. So Index Card RPG, in a nutshell, is basically a streamlined, more efficient, kind of fast, brutal, like effective cinematic type of game that takes all the good elements out of stuff like D20, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and streamlines it into a much more efficient system. There are some changes that, if you've been following Drunken Dragons or Runehammer games, as he's changed the channel name to, you'll recognize those. So they'll definitely come up, and you'll see those little changes and little bits of difference there. I'm going to do something real quick because I realized that I do not have the chat open. So let me do that real quick. There we go. Sorry about that shout there. But basically, if you were to order this package, you're going to get Index Card RPG, the Worlds book, which is basically a book that is all about some different worlds that that Runehammer has put together. There's Alfheim, which is the main kind of core fantasy staple world. There's Ghost Mountain, which is a pretty fantastic, kind of a grim, dark Western world that is maybe on the cusp of falling into hell. Kind of depends on how your games go. It's actually really interesting, and there's a great live play on... I'm forgetting the channel name now, but there are some great live plays. If you just look on YouTube and say Ghost Mountain, it'll come up, and I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it, but I think it might be the Murder Hobo broadcast, or Murder Hobo show. I could be wrong, and it's probably something else, but it's one of the ICRPG podcasts that are available on YouTube. And that one's actually run by Brandish Gilhelm, the writer of Runehammer. So it's a really great world. And then the other one that's included in there is Warp Shell, which is kind of a fantasy, like, heavy metal style game. Every time I've seen it, it feels like a heavy metal type game. There's these warp shells, which are basically like these faster than light travel ships that go through the warp. There's these weird mutant aliens called reptoids. And then there's also like mecha and stuff that's available for you. Warp shells are really neat setting for some hard edge, like sci-fi. So that's really cool. The next one is the World Map Booster Pack, or Poster Pack. This basically is all the posters and stuff from the World's book, but with poster size formatting, and it's kind of like an atlas, if you would. The ICRPG Core Book 2, which is the main book that you would need if you want to play in Shaoyun. The other book that you might want to use, which is entirely optional, would be the World Book, because there is this different advancement system that's introduced inside there that I suggest that you use inside Shaoyun. And then from here, these are kind of the bonus things that I haven't purchased here, but I would suggest that you give a considering how cheap this bundle is. It's only $19. It's a $57 value, so pretty cool actually. Volume 1, 2, and 3 here. These are basically 100 pieces of dungeon terrain, monsters, and things like that that are designed into index cards where the game actually gets its name. And basically what you can do is use these as prep. You can use these as make like terrain inside your games. And there's a whole video on Runehammer where he kind of explains it and how to do like the location obstacle goal type setup, how to lay out these cards kind of like tarot cards to say like what your next adventure would be. And the art inside there is pretty fantastic. It lines up with all the art that is inside the ICRPG products. With that said, let's take a look at the beta for Shaoyun here. I will say that there is limited amounts of art inside the Shaoyun beta right now, unfortunately, basically because I'm doing it all myself. I just don't have a whole lot of time right now to be able to release a lot of art with this and refined good art with this while I'm learning how to use a tablet. So it's going to come with time. Right now, the beta is pretty much words only. There's a few pictures inside there. Mostly they're pictures that were available via open source. And there's a few pictures that I crumbly kind of scribbled together using my tablet, which I intend to refine and make a little bit better as we go. But let me just get a bit of the page here so we can take a look at the cover. This is the Shaoyun beta version 1.0, which was released 12/27/2018. As I release more of these, I'm going to update the cover to reflect it appropriately. And as you can tell, like I said, it is used for Index Core RPG. However, a lot of these elements are actually compatible with other games like Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, where Shaoyun kind of originally started. But I will say from the creator's perspective, I don't think D&D captured exactly what I wanted from it. So that was the main reason for moving to ICRPG. Let's go ahead and flip down. So this is the first half of the map. And then let me see if I can find a way. I guess I can't. Well, this is half the map. And then the second half of the map is on the other side here. This is basically the entire region that you'll be playing in. The Shaoyun region up to the north, which is kind of a green color here. And then there's also the Freelands to the south, which we kind of touch upon. If you want to find out more about this world, and particularly the Freelands, there's actually a campaign. If you check on the playlists, there's going to be one that is a Stratmere campaign taking place in the Freelands. And it was a really fantastic game. And it helped kind of refine some of my ideas and things like that. So if you notice that this map, there's actually two levels on it. There's this lighter green color and then kind of this earthy green color. The reason for that is basically one of the most important things to know about Shaoyun is that it's a world that the entire world experiences monsoon seasons. So during the monsoon seasons, this area that is a lighter green is pretty much always flooded and hard to travel across. So with that said, elements and weather and seasons are a really big important part of the game. I have a few rules inside there about how to handle that, and I'm going to flesh those out as I go along. But let's keep moving here. So of course we've got our acknowledgement stuffs, and here is our table of contents. I wanted to stop on this one, not only because it's one of my real quick drawings here of the lanterns, but I just wanted to show you guys what is in this beta. Normally when you get a beta packet, unless it comes from Fantasy Flight Games or like Wizards of the Coast or those big companies, it's usually pretty thin. So I'm pretty proud to say that this one tops out at really 52 pages of content, and then the last page with me talking about the Kickstarter. So it's actually a lot of content in there, and keep in mind there's almost no real major amount of art in here, so it's pretty dense inside of terms. So what do you get with this beta, and why should you really download it? There's going to be character creation inside there, as you'd expect. Starter loot that makes sense for the setting. Weapons that are specific to the setting. Classes that are specific to the setting. The bioforms, which is kind of like your races in other games that are specific to the setting. Shaoyun spells, which is an entirely different spell system that is interchangeable with regular index card RPG. So if you like the spells that are inside here, you could actually just take the element part out of it and use that spell verbatim inside ICRPG right now inside any of your games, and it'll work just fine. Some spellcaster options, again, these will cross-platform with any sort of ICRPG game, and there are some really great ideas for players of other systems inside here as well. The next bit is martial arts. Martial arts was designed so that you could use it outside of Shaoyun if you wanted to, but it is one of the major things that makes Shaoyun what Shaoyun is. Through a couple different revisions, it came out to be kind of a paper, rock, scissors type system, and we'll talk more about that when I get to that side of the rules here. I also have a section for new rules like social exchanges and immortality inside Shaoyun, because I'm portraying kind of this mythic China, Zhansha comics, and this like a Journey West kind of feel. It in mythic Korea mainly. Characters don't really stop when they become immortals, and immortals is kind of a tricky word because basically it means that you've gotten past what a normal human can do in skill level, and you can basically withstand a normal human's attacks, but you are still, in a sense, kind of mortal. You ascend to a new level, there are new threats, new challenges for you, and your responsibilities change. So that's what I address inside that section. Our campaign, we're actually going to start as mortals, and we're going to work our way towards immortality. Depending on how the game goes, we'll probably actually play into immortality for a little while, just because I want to show how that works inside the filmed game as well. Next bit, of course, is the setting, and this is actually the part that I was took the longest time for me, because building charts is kind of a slow process if you've never really done it. So this part took a little while for me to get everything squared away, how I wanted it, and get the right feel. There's probably going to be some changes inside here. Honestly, as I was getting ready to go to the launch, I think that some things maybe didn't get as much attention as I would have liked, so I'll probably end up making some changes and tweaks along the way. But the first bit talks about Shaoyun in general and the world of Stratmere that the continent is in. And then I start off with one of the three kingdoms included inside the book: the Rung Kingdom, or the Dragon Kingdom, or the the Eastern Kingdom, whatever you want to call it. All three names are completely valid and okay. And then I go into my tables. I was originally just going to give a setting like the way that that ICRPG does, where it explains the region, or I should say the core does, where it explains the region and just a few details about it. But then I decided that Worlds had a better format, so I follow the format that Worlds put out, but I also included a location obstacle and goal chart for the Eastern Kingdom. And then I included one of the loot charts that I'm working on, which is the Realm of Immortals. This is mostly because of the intention of the game. With your characters being mortals trying to ascend to immortality, this is the loot that they're going to be striving for. So I wanted to get people a taste of what the big items are. This would be similar to like your mythic roll chart, or your epic loot chart, I should say. And then I've included an adventure called Not Your Time, which is honestly a lot of fun. I've ran it in a different system, and I've changed a few things so that it fits Shaoyun. It was one that basically it's about a friend who dies, and you're given a chance to bring them back to life. It's kind of that classic tale that comes up in pretty much every form of mythology, but it's got a nice Shaoyun feel to it. There are some complications that can come up, and it's a very, very easy way to either revitalize a campaign that's going on in Shaoyun, or just start a campaign if you really want to start kind of in the thick of it. And then lastly, of course, like I said, I'm going to talk about the Kickstarter stuff. So let's just quickly go into here. I basically talk about like what ICRPG is and the different modes of play for Shaoyun. This is one of the things that I thought was kind of important from talking to different people in different groups. A lot of people like different types of games, and while I'm shooting for a high fantasy as kind of the default for Shaoyun, I don't want that to be the only way that people play it. So I've created some rule sets in here for a Realm of Mortals, which is a more historically inspired version of Shaoyun. and it tells you what things you should limit, what things you should push for, what things you should actually play towards for your story and things like that, and what weapons and armor make the most sense. Little changes and tweaks that you can do so that you can get that feel. The next type I give you is the Realm of Heroes. This is kind of your Zhenghu, which is kind of low fantasy, and your Wulin, which is kind of your high fantasy of the wuxia martial arts fantasy feel. There's not a lot of magic, but there is a lot of martial arts and superhuman stuff. I'm just noticing that there's a little formatting thing right there. I'll have to correct that. If I didn't already correct it, I'll have to check because this might be an old file. So this is where I imagine that my campaign with the guys is pretty much going to start. We're going to start at this wuxia level, and we're going to work our way up. I'm thinking that we're going to be at the Wulin area, which is kind of more high fantasy, but still kind of grounded in reality, not really immortality. Wulin is kind of the default that you see in a lot of martial arts movies, especially from like Chinese cinema that's come out more recently in the last like 10 years. Stuff like Hero is a really good example, or The Promise, or The Warrior, and a few others that I'm not sure that a lot of people will recognize. Gomon, which is actually a Japanese movie, but it has the right level of what I'm shooting for. That's the kind of level that we're shooting for, like near perfection kind of human martial arts type stuff. So we're going to start kind of inside this area, but we're going to work our way to the next tier, which is Realm of Immortals. This is kind of the default for Shaoyun. This is where I think most campaigns should go. I think they're probably going to start, if you play by the book, what I suggest, you're probably going to start in the Wulin area and move into Realm of Immortals, which is kind of your myths and legends. This would be your like heavy CGI movies. And this is stuff like The Journey West, your big epic stuff like that can change. It also is a chance for your characters to become Goblins, to become immortals and basically monitor the jail that has monsters in it, or create laws and order and establish and carry out those rules and regulations in the mortal world. There we go. So it's going to be a different kind of game when you get to Realm of Immortals. And this, like I said, is kind of the default, so you don't really need to do anything to change the game. It's expected that you will eventually get there. And then I've got a couple of historical paintings and things like that inside here. These are kind of filler pieces, but they are pretty fantastic for getting the feel of what the setting is. Each one of them I've noted where they are, and like I said, they are open source. Pretty much all of them, if I remember right, were found on, let me just find it real quick here, because I credit it at the beginning of the book. The Met Library for Public Domain Images. So if you are looking for some good public domain images that you can use at least to put out your beta, that's the place that I used. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. We go into character creation from here. Character creation is pretty standard. There's no major changes from how Index Card RPG does their stuff, except for, of course, the stuff that's specific to Shaoyun. We've got Shaoyun Starter Loot, which does a lot of the same things that Starter Loot does in ICRPG. It's just flavored for the setting. From there, we go into to the weapons. And the weapons that are repeats, I didn't go into details about what those tags are because I do want you to support the creator. But I do have a couple of new weapons that I put inside here that have their tags included. And they're all pretty self-explanatory. I did include the Korean names and the English names. I do want to put a disclaimer out there. My Korean is probably the worst ever. I'm still kind of learning it as I go. And I don't expect anybody who's playing this to adhere 100% to the language and say that all the names have to be in it. But I do encourage you to try, because it does help fill in the setting. If you at least try those names and mention what things are and make it feel right. But nobody's going to chop your head off if instead of saying Kakara, you say a ring staff. So easy day. No worries about that stuff. The other thing that I did want to point out, there are a couple of interesting changes in here. There's Zhou Chong, which is the musket. Guns are a viable thing inside Shaoyun, and that's actually a major important thing. It's a big technological advancement that's fairly new to the country. And then I did want to double back because there was one item on here that from the starting loot that is probably my favorite one that I did for it. It's the pet snake. Basically, this is the one that lets you roll twice when you get loot. But my favorite part about it really is the part where he says, if you can believe him, he says one day he'll become an Imugi, which is a dragon. This is such a minor thing the players have really loved and latched onto. Part of me really hopes that somebody does take this in our campaign, because I do want to actually reward that and eventually give the players a chance to let their pet snake become a dragon and become an NPC inside the world, because I think that's a really neat, fun thing to do. Let's see. Going back into the classes next. I didn't include all of the classes that are going to be available in Shaoyun, but I did include the ones that I think are the most iconic. All the other classes you can kind of fill in with standard ICRPG stuff, and it completely transfers over fine. But these are the ones that I think really sell the tone of Shaoyun without giving you every single class that's going to be available. So the Posu, and if you look at each one of these, there's going to be like an italic section at the beginning. Usually the first word or first couple words is going to tell you exactly what that word means. So in this case, a Posu is a gunner. And this is pretty much breaking down what a person with a gun is. They're mainly from the Western Kingdom. And this is kind of similar to like your arcane archer, but it's like an arcane gunman, using a matchlock gun with paper cartridges. And one of the things that a lot of players have really taken a liking to is you actually end up getting a gun that shoots supernatural ammo made out of ink. And I don't really describe it in here, and I've heard it described a couple different ways. I think one of my favorite ones that somebody had mentioned was they imagined it as kind of like a fountain pen, and you pulled the little lever and it squirted out the ink, just because it was kind of hilarious to think about it like that. They also get a couple of spells that make them feel like a hunter tracker. So this is kind of your ranger magic gunman feel. Like, you get the spells you get don't feel like big flashy magics. You're not going to throw a fireball. Instead, you're going to cast a spell that makes the target of your spell leave footprints that are flowers growing. You can make paper magic that if somebody tells a lie, it burns up. If they're telling a partial lie, it just singes on the ends, which is probably like the top spell, in my opinion, is the paper magic one. And then another spell that lets you do more damage, kind of like a hunter's mark inside other games. From there is the Hanusa, which is a doctor of traditional medicine. Basically, I felt like Shaoyun didn't have a cleric or a holy caster. And well, they do, but it's not the same. It's not going to be your traditional cleric, I pray to my god, and you get magic healing. Instead, doctors and medicine men are important. So this is a character who practices the art of Hanbang, which is traditional medicine, medicinal teas, acupuncture, moxibustion, and things like that, that in our world don't have nearly as powerful as effects as they do inside this game world. So their powers are mainly focused around like healing and recovery and things like that. So if you wanted to be the healer in the group, the Hanusa is probably the best bet for you. One of my favorite things out of this class is probably the healing needle, which gives you acupuncture needles that you can throw and heal your friends. That was kind of a throwback to a game I did where I played a ninja that it was a D&D 5e game, and the way I did my bardic inspiration is I spit Fukumimbari, the mouth darts, at my allies, and it would shoot basically battle toxins into them. So that was a fun idea that I had, and it seems to be kind of a popular choice as well. And then some of this stuff is kind of taken from stories and things like that, like Song of Sutures. There's a story in Korea about a young woman that sings as she sutures people, and they heal faster than normal. So that's actually where that one came from, medicinal tea. And you can tell that there's some references to things like animes and things like that inside here. Like I've got the Sacred Jewel Shard, which is obviously a pullback to Inuyasha. So that's definitely a fun one to play. The next one is the Mabosa. The Mabosa is a mage. It is kind of an elemental mage is the best way to think about it. Your powers come from different spells that are related to different elements. Each spell inside this game does have an element tied to it, and that goes back to the martial arts system. The martial arts system is actually designed so that everyone can benefit from it, not just melee fighters. So we'll get into that a little bit later when we get down there. The Mabosa feels very much like a kind of a priestly elemental wizard. There's not too much to say about it beyond that. If you've played any game with a caster, it's going to feel very familiar to you. The next one is the Kasang, which is a female-only class. This was mainly chosen because it fit the historical information. It's a courtesan entertainer. I say female only. However, if you have a player who's super interested in playing a male, I would encourage them to engage in that mechanic and just ignore the female only. Or if they're interested in playing a male who's posing as a Kasang and a female, then that's an interesting story as well. So I do encourage that stuff. Really, when I put hard rules in here, like female only, take it for what it's worth and change it if you need it. But this class is basically kind of like a geisha. You are a slave to the state, and that your basic premise, or your basic thing inside the game is that you are going to be a social person. You get a lot of stuff that helps you out inside the new social exchange rules. So that's one of the things you get. And then the other thing you get is legacies. Legacies are kind of a supernatural power is the best way to describe it. They act similar to spells, but they're not spells. So if I ever tell my players, hey, you're in an area where spells don't work, if somebody has a legacy, I'm still going to let a legacy happen because that doesn't cover what I'm looking for. And legacies typically are more like a ritual. So there's things like legacy care of garments. If sewing while resting, all allies recover to full HP in 1 hour. So this is basically a way for me to show that if you take a moment to care for your allies, it's good for their physical and mental well-being. That's kind of what the legacies do. There's Song of General Toshiwo, which the two times I've had players do it, I never tell them what the song is. They always ask me, and I go, well, what do you think the song is? I encourage that. If there's anything like that, or the Seijo poetry, where you have a chance to really add to the world, add to it and establish the facts as you play. Because what that song is to me and to you and your game is going to be totally different, and that's okay. That's encouraged. One of the more interesting ones here is the Gibu, which is a bodyguard. This is the only class that has the ability to basically get a cohort. So that's actually one of the neat ones that's inside there. He is able to equip gear. He's able to learn martial arts and things like that. So that's actually a really cool thing. The other thing that is kind of intended here is if you ever play this character, you take the Gibu. If your character dies, your Gibu makes a really good replacement character, which you could then start taking classes or taking milestone rewards from other classes like the Flowering Knight and stuff like that. The next one is the Jeja, which is the Disciple of Martial Arts. There's no big description on this one because I'm trying to figure out a good generic Disciple of Martial Arts description that is fitting without being too narrow. Right now, it's mainly focused on kind of the idea of a traditional student of Korean-style martial arts. So we have stuff like dobak, which is the uniform that they wear. And then they get the starting martial arts style. This is actually pretty cool because you get an element and tradition. Each martial art is made up of those two particular sections, and they form what your martial art actually can do inside the game. This is the only way to start with an element and tradition is to be a Jeja. You can advance and take elements and take traditions, but you take them separately. So if you want to start with both of them, that's a really good, easy way to do that. The class is mainly focused around this whole mystic martial arts feel. There is some stuff put in there so that this class can work a little bit better with the group, kind of like how the monk has the lay on, or not the monk having lay on hands. The monk has the healing ability that in D&D. We have palm healing, which is basically very similar. It's Mr. Miyagi, oh, and then you touch him kind of thing. And then the other thing that's really unique to this class that is kind of the big sell-all item here is the Style Masters brand. This is pretty much the main way to get this. You can get it through a loot chart, but it allows you to combine 2 martial arts styles that you have learned, and you get the benefits and abilities of both, and you only get the weakness of one. So it allows you to create a powerful style. And then the other thing that I love about this is once you've named it, you can't change it, and you got to name this powerful new style. So it gives the players a reason to learn martial arts and develop and become something special inside the world. If a character combines 2 forms and creates the Towering Inferno style, then the Towering Inferno style should gain traction in the world. It should become something that people look forward to learning. They fear fighting because it's a master style, or they hear about in legends and rumors and things like that. Like, when this comes up, let your players have the gravitas that comes with it. The next bit is me talking about the other classes. Just a real quick here, there's the Dobong, which is kind of a guardian, the Hurong, which is a flower knight. Basically, it's a traveling knight who specializes in all forms of combat, but they're a little bit more of a jack-of-all-trades kind of combat fighter, whereas the Jeja is mainly focused on martial arts. The Solsa, which is a spy master, they're kind of a ninja courtier kind of mix. And then the next one is the Mu, which is the Exorcist, which is probably one of my favorite ones right now because it is iconically like what a traveling priest is inside Shaoyun. It's not the I pray to my god to get special powers and things like that. It's an exorcist going out and defeating the undead creatures and capturing spirits and things like that. So I'm real excited for that one. That class is been tested thoroughly. I just didn't include it on this one because of some of the other classes I included I thought were a little bit better for the beta test. But those will all become available as I start progressing through. Pretty much all of these classes actually are ready for full testing. I just wanted to, like I said, limit the amount of stuff that I include inside the beta because some of them are in working process, like the Hurong and the Guardian definitely need a little bit of tweaking. Which I'll get from testing. The next bit is the bioforms. This is all pretty standard stuff. If you've been following any Strapmere, it's going to feel really familiar to you, but for anybody who hasn't, there's humans, which is your standard stock, what I am, what you are probably. The Soga, which are these tall alien-like creatures with smooth features, kind of think like the way I'm envisioning them is they're very elongated, tall, kind of like unnaturally long limbs, but like very, very smooth faces and like a nose that comes out wide and is smooth. I have to get doing some art to really, get the feel of them, but I wanted them to feel kind of alien and not quite right as compared to a human. The next is Wildborn. Wildborn are not true Fae. Basically, Fae are kind of like demon monsters inside this world. They want to capture reality and make it their own. So one of the ways that they do that is they capture children and they bring them into the wild and they become Wildborn. Basically, they were abducted and they typically have some sort of telltale sign that they were abducted. So fangs, tails, feathers instead of hair. They're really good at magic. They have some charisma from the event. The next one is the Garuda, which is a flightless bird. They mainly live in the Freelands to the south, but because it's so close to Shaoyun, it's a very viable character or a bioform for you to play. And they have an intense, long-lasting hatred of the Fae. Next is Child of the Lotus. My Child of the Lotus is kind of like a planar touched creature. You have some sort of blood that is from a different elemental plane, which are called the petals inside this game. And you show that through your being. They typically take up a lot of the hierarchy classes, the higher up classes, or social classes, I should say, inside like the wrong kingdom, which is included inside the book. Basically, people look at the Child of the Lotus as they are blessed. So they're kind of these kind of holy adjacent type people is kind of the best way to call it. The next is the Karat, which is a huge bipedal rhinoceros person. This was mainly a callback to my friend Jeremy, who's been on L5R. He ended up with a figurine that was a Rhino Man, and we decided to let it happen in a game. And the character has been so loved by all of us that this was my way to kind of like honor that into the game that we're writing, is including the Karat, which is these big devout warrior priests that are bipedal rhinoceros people. They believe the gods to be sacred. They're incredibly religious, and I don't go into great detail inside the book, but I think as I add stuff to the book, I'll add some more details about who each of these races are. But the Karat, basically, they have two types inside their society. There's some smugglers and slave traders, and then there's the holy caste, which is basically all your priests, your paladin-like characters, your people that are super holy and religious. But they pretty much everybody is that is Karat is superstitious in some way. And then the last one is the Manyo, which is a female only. This one I wouldn't encourage you to change, mainly because it fits the legend. And there's a typo inside there, F female only. Good to know. But this is basically a white-haired witch, and it's the reason I say I don't encourage you to change it is because they're. Let me take that back. I do encourage you to change it. I do encourage you to eventually make a male, but understand that they are stupid rare and they are signs of the apocalypse. So if you have a character who wants to be a white-haired witch that is male, chances are that character was spared from being drowned in a river, and they should have some sort of dark future ahead of them. So think about that when you go into that option. But they are a neat class, and this actually touches on one of the other changes I made. Is not only is there hard and easy like normally in ICRPG, there's also a step in each direction, a little bit more challenging or less challenging depending on which one we're looking at. So there's extreme, hard, normal, easy, and auto success in this case. Basically, this was my way of being able to create challenges that make sense. So like if you go and fight something that is as an immortal, it's obviously going to be an impossible challenge to actually damage them, but it may not be impossible to hit them. It may just be extremely hard to hit them. And that's kind of where the idea behind this adjustment came from. From here, we go into spells. Wisdom powers, they work basically the same. However, there's a whole list inside here of Shaoyun specific stuff here. One of my favorite ones inside here is, here we go, Ahang Sulman, which is basically a planar gate to the other parts of the universe. The cool thing about it, in story-wise, is that when you open the gate, you don't really control what comes in and out of the gate, and it remains open for 1d4 days. So opening a gate is really convenient for your players, but it also may change things. And then if you pass through the gate, you will take some damage as well. So inexperienced characters, if they walk through the gate and they end up in a hostile area, this could spell death for them. So this is kind of a spell that comes with some words of warning, usually when you learn it, kind of thing. Intelligence spells are split up into the elements. I kind of touched on this a moment ago. Basically, the elements here matter when it comes to martial arts, but other than that, you can take any spell you want. You're not limited by your choices on elements. If you want to have an air spell, and then a void spell, and then an earth spell, and then a wood spell, it's totally fine. No problems with that. So I kind of mentioned them. There's earth, fire, metal, water, wood, void. So those are the elements that are included inside here. It's a little bit of a spin on the Chinese elements, with void added simply because it made sense for the kind of style of game that I wanted to run. But the spells are basically broken down into the elements that make the most sense. Let's see here. Oh, and each one of the spell groups has one spell that is considered like a prestige spell, if you would. There's no reason that you can't take this as your first spell that you learn, but it is harder to do. You'll see that it says like hard roll, do this, or for it's pretty much all of them say that they're a hard roll, do this, and it gives you like a very powerful ability in the end. Some of my favorite ones are actually inside the void ones because they're just so weird. Like altering the course lets you change the result of one roll. Another one that's really good is like all things are equal, which lets you modify a bonus that is on an item, but it must be the same kind. So a stat bonus stays a stat bonus, an effort bonus stays an effort bonus, but you can rename what effort it is. So if it started as a magic effort and you wanted to make it a weapon effort, this is a way for you to change those magic items and make them custom to you. And then the Void's super powered spell is Sever Ties, which basically makes them unable to use power spells or magic items for magic effect rounds. So if your magic effect is like a +4 and then you roll real good, this is a pretty powerful spell. This is also a spell that if you have players that are relying on this stuff and you really want to shock them, this is going to be a good spell for that. From here, I go into the caster options. Caster options specific to the setting. There's Harmony, which is kind of your Zen casting. This is your traditional casting that pretty much everybody uses. There's Dance. Shaoyun translates from the fantasy language, really, to Little Dance, which is kind of a play on two words from Chinese that mean little and dance, kind of smash and merge together to create Shaoyun. Which kind of refers to both how magic is cast, because usually magic involves some form of movement, and then also it refers to the little dance that courtiers do in court. So that's kind of a fun little extra tidbit that's not included in the book yet. But basically, this one allows you to use dancing as you're casting, very literally, and it kind of changes the way that your spells work. The next one is Ink, which is kind of designed around doing art, having tattoos. If you want to be the classic Japanese tale of the painter whose paintings come alive, that's an ink caster, 100%. The next one is Vapor, which is kind of involving around smokes, incense, perfumes, and things like that. And then the last one is Games. This one is kind of inspired by a Huatu deck. Basically, the idea is that your character has a Huatu deck inside the game, and he can assign spells to certain cards, which you can absolutely do with the cards as dice rules. If you want, you can even assign cards the spell. Once you've assigned the cards the spells, you can take a playing card deck and you can draw out a card. Let's say you get a number 7 off my example list here. That's Burning Kiss, and you cast that spell. There's some rules around here about like if you want to choose a different spell, or if you don't get a spell that's included because you haven't assigned that card to a spell yet. That's all covered inside there. It's probably one of my favorite ones. I haven't seen it in play though yet, so we'll see how it actually goes. It looks like there's a little bit of formatting weirdness over here that I'll keep in mind as well. I got lots of changes to update here. And then there is a note about the Huatu deck. It's basically 75 cards, but because of accessibility, I wrote it for a standard playing card deck so that every player has access to that, at least more readily available access than they would a Huatu deck, which is an interesting deck of cards. They're usually very beautiful, kind of like a tarot deck is, and there's a few different games you can play with them that are actually quite entertaining. And then from here, we get into martial arts. Martial arts is really the bread and butter of the system. This is what a lot of people were excited to see. Like I mentioned, it's kind of a rock, paper, scissors type system. When you pick out your martial arts, you have an element which tells you what things you can use to get the benefit of that martial arts tradition. Basically, how it works is if you are using the air style, you can use any of these weapons or magic to get the benefit that's given to you from using dragon style, for example. If you don't have an element and you just have a tradition, then you will get unarmed combat only. So a mortal level hero will almost never have an element, is kind of the way to think about it. Like a student at a school is going to learn how to do a tradition first, and then he's going to learn how to do an element, traditionally speaking. If you've ever done martial arts, this is kind of the basics of white belt. You typically learn how to punch and kick in very basic forms. And then as you advance belts, you start picking up weapons as an option or in your training. There's 10 different styles here, or 10 different elements here, and 10 different traditions as well. So there's several different combinations that are available, and as characters advance, they can mix and match these. The good thing is pretty much at the beginning of each of your turns, you can choose to change this, and it's a free action to do so. So if you were fighting an air dragon and you wanted to change to metal dragon, for example, or metal tiger even, or any of the other ones, you just say that you're changing, and then those effects go into play. A person will notice looking at this list, there are some carryover weapons. Like, for example, if you use the spear, air is really good for you. Let's see, what else here? The Eastern style is good for you, and the Western style is good for you. So if you are playing like a spearmaster, those would be the elements that you would want to add to your style repertoire. And then traditions, basically, once you activate a tradition, you get this benefit. The cool thing, as I mentioned with the elements, is most of these ones, especially the ones with elemental names, they tell you what elements you can actually use with each one of them. So if you are using Void style, you can use Void magic to get the benefit of your dragon martial art or your dragon tradition. So in that case, when you are using a Void spell, you could actually do Wisdom in the Scales, which is once per turn. When an enemy damages you, meet or beat the current target with a strength roll to counterattack. That is something that basically every person has the chance to earn in game. The other thing that you'll see is that there is a strong and weak category. How this works is it's the attacker facing. So if the attacker is facing someone with snake, they are strong against snake. If they are facing someone with internal strength, they are weak against it. This basically modifies the target number for when people are attacking. If you attack someone who's using internal strength, instead of fighting them at the normal DC, your actual DC is actually going to go up by 3 because you're weak against it. If you are fighting someone in the strong style or if you are fighting someone who you're strong against in the snake style, your 2-hit number is going to drop down by 3. It's that hard, easy 2-hit, or I should say, to engage and activate type thing. I go into bare detail up here about how it works. It can be a little confusing, so I would say work through it. And if you have questions, please let me know, because your questions will help me make this more understandable for everybody. So like I said, if you're strong against the style, it's easy. If you're weak, it's hard. I try to keep it that way. That way it's very easy for a player to be able to figure out what they need and a DM to figure out what they need without it being super complicated. When you gain a milestone, you can take any of this stuff as advancements, but you take it one at a time. You don't take an element and a tradition. I have dragon style, snake style, tiger style, eagle, crane, road, storm, way of life, binding, and internal strength. And I also encourage you to make up your own and kind of play with what it's strong, what it's weak against, because obviously I can't write thousands of styles, and I'm sure you're going to come up with better ones than even I did. When you do, just modify these, what it's strong, what it's weak against stuff to match what you put out. So if you put in something that is strong against internal strength, for example, maybe just kind of move what bindings, instead of making binding style strong against internal strength, make binding style strong against your new thing, and then make internal strength weak against your new thing. And then that's a quick, easy way to insert your own martial arts inside there. The next bit is social exchanges. Basically, if you're familiar with the chunks rule, it's chunks for social combat. If players are completely successful, they get exactly what they wanted from the NPCs, even if the NPCs are a little upset about it and will hold a grudge. If they get mostly successful, but they were damaged, they have to compromise a little. If they get really damaged, they have to compromise majorly. And if they lose, they have to agree to the NPC's terms. I've got a great little example here about a Kasang who's arguing with a general, and she basically wins, but she finds out that to get the aid that she's asking for, she's got a decision ahead of her. She can wed him, and he'll give 1,000 soldiers and a team of witch hunters. But he claims that, if she's unwilling to wed, that's what he'll do. But if she is willing to wed, he'll give major concessions. This is kind of a way for GMs to modify the things. This example is a really good one because it allows me to advance the story and still kind of give players options. I can either say, hey, you're my bride, but I'm going to give you all of my military might, or you've impressed me and I'm going to give you some of my military might, but it's your choice. And then the players have an idea of how they can pursue their own stories. From here, we go into Immortality. I talk about what the different the realms in Shaoyun look like. This is my universal map, which is a blooming lotus. And then it kind of shows how the dome of creation works. Basically, the idea here is that when you die, you're not dead as an immortal. Like you are not as immortal, you're not just dead. You go through the cycle of reincarnation. So basically, Shaoyun's the mortal realm. You die, you go to really the spirit wilds first to be judged, then the realm of death, and then you go to the realm of rebirth, momentarily stop in life, and then you are back on Shaoyun, at least until you break the cycle and ascend through enlightenment or other means. And that's kind of the karmatic cycle that's produced through here. As I mentioned, there is the Fae being a big problem inside here, because I have 2 seasons inside the world: the flood season and the dry season with the monsoons. There's a drowned court and a drought court. Think of this like the drowned court is similar to the winter Fae. The drought court is a little bit similar to the summer Fae. There's actually a third faction of Fae creatures called the Iron Fae, or the Iron Tribe. I'll talk more about them later on as the book develops, but basically, because the world is advancing and evolving with technology and guns, a new type of Fae has emerged, and that Fae is poisonous to the other Fae that live in the drowned and drought courts. So there's a little bit of political problems, and why the Fae are showing up inside the world is mainly due to the fact that their world is being disrupted. So that's one of the more interesting kind of obscure things that hopefully we might get to see inside the campaign. It kind of depends on what the players are interested in seeing, and of course what I roll up on some charts. Then there's the elemental petals. Each of the planes are referred to as petals. So if you go to the plane of life, that is the petal of life. Again, kind of reinforcing the idea of a blooming lotus. There's one for each one of each one of the planes of, or each one of the elements, I should say. And then we talk about the celestial petals. In a game that is all about immortals, really what's going to end up happening is you're going to start in Stratmere, you're going to go into the Spirit Wilds, and then depending on how your characters want to advance things, you're probably going to stay in Spirit Wilds, Drowned Court, Drought Court, Life, Death, Rebirth, maybe venture into the elemental petals. But the celestial petals are going to be reserved for like your high level of play. If you ever decide that you want to challenge a god, you want to ascend to become a god, not just an immortal, that's where that stuff is going to happen. That's going to be our truly mythic stories. And then from here, I talk about how basically mechanically what happens when you're an immortal. You can't be harmed by mortals. You still get damage done. So like if a mortal stabs you, they still stab you. It still hurts, but it doesn't leave any permanent wounds. As soon as the blade's out of you, you are healed like it never happened. It's kind of this cinematic movie version of immortality. Monsters, other immortals and gods, and basically anything that's ascended above a mortal has the ability to injure you. So you can see that come up inside game. It doesn't mean that because you're immortal, the monsters you fought last week are no longer a threat or problem. It also gives players a reason to still care about the human world, because some things mortals just aren't very good at dealing with. If I say that there's a giant fire-breathing fox that's attacking the village, calling out to like a Naruto reference, chances are an immortal's going to have to deal with that, because mortals just aren't equipped for that sort of thing. I also have a different type of heart system here. There's mortal hearts and immortal hearts. When you gain an immortal heart, you erase all your mortal ones, and then you get a blue immortal heart to show that. Monster stat blocks, the immortal hearts are blue as well. Inside the adventure, I've got an immortal inside there for you to take a look at. And then from here, I kind of talk about what Shaoyun is and what it kind of isn't. Basically, it's the world that me and my friends created, and it's a moon that looks onto like a regular planet, like an Earth, which they refer to as the Mystic Moon. It's a callback to like Escaflowne, which I was a huge fan of that show. So that's a really fun thing to add inside there. And then it talks about how it's divided into 3 kingdoms. It's kind of this warring states, 3 kingdoms type period. If you look, China and Korea's history runs very parallel. Things that happen in China also happen in Korea, so it's good to pull from both references inside this one. Korea went through a 3 kingdoms period as well before uniting and becoming the kingdom that it was before becoming Korea. With that in mind, this is meant to capture kind of the sociological stuff that comes with a unified medieval Korea, but with kind of like just on the cusp of being unified. Like it's just before all that happens, sociologically speaking anyways. I talk about like how the seasons work, that there's a dry season, a flood season, what happens in the dry season and the flood season, political discourse, what spirituality has effects on the world. And one of my favorite ones in here, this is more to gather that fantasy feel to the game. Impure life leads to impure death. Basically, if you lead an impure life, chances are you will become something impure in your next life or after death. You can become a hungry dead or an evil spirit, or you might turn into a monster. So I expect a lot of stories to have kind of a sad ending for the villain, because the villain used to be a person, and they would have been great if they didn't succumb to their greed or whatever their downfall was. A lot of like Chinese and Korean kind of like monster stories have kind of that feel. So that was a really important thing to add for me. And then, of course, immortality and fantasy is reality. Make it big, fantastic. These characters are more than heroes. They're legends being told. That is a really big key for GMs to remember when they're running Shaoyun. From here, I go into kind of your standard, like this is what it's about. Here's the lay of the land, dangers to dare, details to discover, friends and fellowship, dungeons to delve. Basically, these are idea seeds for you. And if that's not enough, the next bit will definitely give you everything you wanted. It's a location, obstacle, and goal chart. Basically, if you are trying to run a game real quick, you roll a couple D20s and you get some stuff. I rolled a couple before doing this filming just so I had stuff to talk about. And for location, I got number 4, which is an ancient stronghold that hides more than secrets. And then I got number 14, or not 14, number 18 here, which is a maze of hallways and paintings that crave key. That if they can get enough, they can leave their pigmented prisons. The next one that I got was 14, which is escape the castle of the 8 unsoiled before it's consumed by its tainted masters. So that's how I'm going to develop my first adventure with these guys. Is they're going to go to that location. They're going to have to face that obstacle, and they're going to have to face that, or they're going to have to try to achieve that goal. I just realized that there is an apostrophe that got coded weird here. Okay, another thing to fix. But as you can tell, basically, this is a really quick, easy way for a GM to put together adventures. This is fantastic for one-shots. It's probably one of my favorite things from the ICRPG core book. is just having these things around to be able to come up with just quick on the fly adventures that feel epic. And that's kind of the goal that I was shooting for on here. And each one of the regions is actually going to have a log chart to roll on. So you're going to have 60 adventure parts for all three regions, 20 in each one of the regions for the location, the obstacle, and the goal. So a lot of different stuff. And then the other thing that's great is because you have so much, you can mix and match. You could take a location from one, an obstacle from another, and a goal from another, and come up with something entirely different that wasn't necessarily intended. You can mix and match with even the ICRPG stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with this. And then from here, I go into my loot chart. A lot of this stuff is inside here, the Realm of Immortals. It's kind of big, powerful loot items. If you are playing this game as a beta, what I'd recommend is you look at the loot charts that are included inside the core book, which this is my ghetto copied version here. The charts that I would recommend that you have available for your players is pretty much all of them, honestly, are fun and useful, and there's no reason to not use them. But definitely you'd want to use the Ancient, the Shabby, the Cursed loot. Probably not the Sci-Fi loot, actually, now that I'm saying that. But this one kind of replaces your epic loot, if you would. There's actually a tier of loot that's even higher in Shaoyun, which is going to be called like Mythic or something along those lines, which is kind of like big story artifact type magic items. So like a sword that only mortals can carry that will kill an immortal. Like big, crazy things like that, that if you introduce them to your game, they will have drastic impact. So some of the items inside here is like special name swords that allow you to use different traditions regardless of what element is used, if any. So like a regular martial artist, if he picks up the Song of the Moon here, you can use the internal strength tradition regardless of if any element is used. So you can use the staff even if you don't have an element that includes a staff. So this is kind of a way to circumvent some of those fighting rules by having a magic weapon that was specifically designed for that style of magic or style of martial arts. You can get some spells inside here, of course, but some of the fun ones here is like, here we go. Let me find it. Like here. This is the type of spell that you get. If you were to play Realm of Heroes and you wanted your players to learn magic or learn a martial arts system, you'd give them like a scroll or something like that. Realm of Immortals, I give you Blue-Green Dragon's Breath, which is a jar filled with simple tea leaves. When opened, a slight breeze picks up the leaves. You watch the leaves move. You learn the air element of martial arts. It's not even one of the crazy ones. Basically, you watch leaves move and you have an epiphany. That is the kind of game that Shaoyun is. I have stuff like a sword that you stand on it and you ride it like a surfboard and it flies. Like Shaoyun has a lot of weird high fantasy nonsense going on in it. That's a fair warning. That's what I wanted from this game, so that's what people are going to get, at least from the Immortal loot here. So there's a lot of like different stuff that's in there. Here's another good one, which is Eobshin's Blessing, which is the avatar of the god of snakes appears. It teaches you the snake martial arts tradition. Here's another one where an immortal king arises and teaches you the eagle tradition. Whereas if you open up the next item on here, an immortal politician that was a rival to that same king will teach you the crane martial arts style. So it kind of seeds this tradition inside there. ICRPG is actually really fantastic for it. It's kind of got like a Dark Souls feel where the more you read into items, the more you see how things are connected to each other and kind of see more of the lore that is inferred into the setting, which is a lot of fun. And there's 100 items in here. Unfortunately, I'm not super talented at making a chart like Runehammer is, so mine takes up a couple pages instead of just like 2 or 3. And then included is our adventure. This adventure is kind of fun and interesting. It plays a little different than some of the other adventures. Basically, you're going to get a session timer. You have certain things that can happen and certain things that have to happen inside this adventure. But when you get to the can happen stuff, players get a lot of control over what things they engage with, which things they run away from. And if they don't if they don't save their friend before the clock runs out, their friend is dead forever. But it's a chance for players to see some of the fun stuff inside there. I included a social combat, regular combats, a little mini game called Hitting Tombstones, which you can see here, which is actually a real game that is played in Korea, or at least was played in Korea, where you try and knock over each other's tombstones with stones. And it has kind of a haunting reflection of the fact that you are in the realm where the dead are waiting to be judged. From there, basically, if you stick around too long, you could actually become consumed by it. There's some included monsters. Unfortunately, again, no art. And I'll work on that as I go along. Some stuff about how to make like a rival martial artist, which this is actually really good for anybody who's playing Shaoyun that wants to do something besides this. This is a good generic rival martial artist block to start with, if you don't want to make one from scratch like a player. There is a Fae inside there. It's probably not the most powerful Fae, but it was thematic and fitting for the adventure. You have a martial arts master inside here as well. And then a couple of fun things. And I don't want to spoil too much of the end in case you do get a chance to play it, but I will say that there is a chance for failure for the PCs, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the game's over. It just changes the terms of what the game is going to be about from that point forward. And I think that's super important for GMs to have available to them. I am shooting for a Kickstarter in Q2 of 2019. Originally, it was going to be Q1. Unfortunately, I've got life stuff, and then there's a chance that it may have to be Q3, but I'm really shooting for Q2, so let's hope that that happens. Final book will include custom art that is specific to the setting, hopefully include a chance for me to hire an artist, because while I'm good at doing abstract paintings on a wall, I'm not so great at the computer yet, so I'm still working on that. More classes, 2 more regions, loot charts, monsters, adventures, and extra things to be unlocked as we go. One of the things that I recently decided I wanted to include as a stretch goal is another class called the Sage, which would be entirely about becoming an immortal. It's like one of the guaranteed ways to do it. But it would also be kind of a mystic diviner is kind of what I'm thinking. So getting some abilities that work similar to like the legacies that the Kasang gets. It'll probably be kind of the same mechanic. It'll be legacies, but they'll be focused on like divining the future and maybe changing odds of dice rolls, or getting an ability that lets you make an encounter easy for a scene or make it hard for a scene for certain people, that sort of thing. And as I think about more, I'll probably unlock more. If you want to find out more about this this book that's coming out, where I'm at in it and all that stuff, do follow me on Facebook. It's just Chris Wilhelm. I tend to put stuff up there occasionally, but I will also update on YouTube as soon as I get the best chance to do so. It looks like I had a couple of viewers, so thanks for everybody who did tune in. Thanks for everybody who's going to tune in afterward. I see Jason Lapel is here. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, definitely check it out. It's free and available. It's inside the description for this video. That's the first link, and then there's a bunch of links afterward. So definitely check that stuff out. If you want to see more games that take place in Stratmere, the world that Shaoyun takes place in, that's the first playlist that's included inside there. And then I included the world building series where I actually built the world that Stratmere takes place in. Or sorry, that Shaoyun takes place in Stratmere. I'm going to go ahead and go because my voice is starting to get hoarse and I can feel it. For everybody that did tune in and has been giving me support along the way, thank you very much. I look forward to actually starting this campaign soon. Unfortunately, we had some family stuff come up, so this is kind of the filler that I'm doing until we are able to get everybody together. Ideally, it should be next week or the following week. We'll get together, we'll run our first adventure, and then we'll kind of play out a campaign and just make some magic happen, hopefully. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you at the gaming table.